Insurance giant Liberty has reportedly regained control of its IT systems after a cyber attack, and this follows Liberty dispatching a team of security specialists to investigate the breach of its IT infrastructure. The Liberty cyber attack and attempted blackmail has also put other life insurance firms on high alert. The insurance industry holds sensitive data on millions of clients, including their banking details and medical records.
Clearly evident that there was a vulnerability in our networks, and that gave rise to this penetration by these by this criminal element. They gained unauthorized and illegal access to our networks, and that is a crime. This was unauthorized access to our networks. They managed to get access to one of our servers that housed email data and attachments, and they stole copies of this information. They then demanded payment in return for this. This was an act of extortion, and we have made absolutely no concession in the face of this attempted extortion. I think investigations of this nature will be protracted in that it's difficult to put all the facts together, and we've been most focused at the moment on making sure that we understand the impact on our clients, the most important to us, and on their financial advisors, and understanding the nature of the breach and the information that's been taken from us. We will leave it to the authorities to pursue the actual perpetrators of this event.
And now joining us in the studio is Tifo Mahapi, software engineer at iAfrican Digital. Welcome, Tifo.
Thank you for having me, Harold.
Just in a nutshell, what does iAfrican Digital do?
We're a software. Well, we develop digital platforms, and mainly to engage African audiences. And one of those platforms we develop is a media publication, online publication called iAfrican.com.
I see. I presume you've been keeping up with what's been happening with Liberty, a big financial institution with enormous resources, but somehow managed to get its systems cracked to the point where somebody was able to paralyze them and demand a ransom.
Correct. And what's worrying, as we saw on the insert before we came on live, and when I spoke to David Monroe earlier on the radio station about an hour ago, is that he confirmed that there was the hackers breached their network, managed to find a vulnerable server, took the data, and then contacted them after taking the data. That raises several questions, one of which is, what kind of systems did they have in place that could be penetrated like that?
Yeah, I mean, that is exactly what comes to mind. Do they have any idea where the attack came from? Were they able to identify the source?
Well, according to Liberty and the statements they've issued and the questions we've asked them definitely directly and speaking to them as well, they're a bit cagey on giving details. I think the standard line they've been giving is that we can't comment on that, this is under criminal investigation. And I don't think that adds any comfort to their customers and stakeholders.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is worrying. There have been examples of these types of attacks, right? Not necessarily in South Africa, but, the city of Atlanta at one point was pretty much shut down. And it's happened elsewhere where people essentially took over systems, took data, people's information, threatened to shut down operations in return for money. You would think that under those circumstances, everybody around the world would be quite alert to these risks.
Definitely. And going back to your point, it has actually happened several times in South Africa. Within a period of 12 months, this is our third quite big data leak or breach.
Right.
About 3 or 4 weeks ago, South Africa experienced, I think, about just under 1 million details of drivers who were paying traffic fines online on a site called viewfines.co.za. Those details were leaked, and those included ID numbers, etc. And coming back to your point, yes, you'd think that by now, I mean, it's 2018, we've had the internet for so long, you'd think that information security would be one of the biggest things that companies concentrate on.
Yeah, but just going back to the original point, specifically ransom-related attacks though have not happened in South Africa, or have they?
No, not yet. Not known. I wouldn't say, because it's a very complicated situation. For instance, let's use the Liberty one as an example.
Yeah.
Had Liberty not gone public, because they kept quiet, remember, for I think 2 days.
That's right.
According to them, now we have to take their word. According to them, this attack, or they became aware of the attack on Thursday last week, and only started alerting customers on Saturday afternoon. So on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, we weren't aware. We all thought that everything's fine until Liberty told us. So coming back to your point on ransomware, it's a very complicated sort of situation where there could have been quite a number, but we would never know because the companies could have paid the ransom and they wouldn't have made that public. So we would not be able to know. Just like in the Liberty case, we didn't know for 2 days until they decided to make it public.
And I mean, the company does say that they didn't pay a ransom, right? But as you say, how would we know? I mean, if typically in these types of attacks, the best way to, from the perspective of the attackers, the best way of getting paid is via cryptocurrencies, right? Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum, etc., which practically cannot be traced.
Well, to a certain extent, if you use things called Bitcoin mixers or tumblers, you can trace, but it's very difficult to trace, to put it that way. And it's at this stage, I think even whether Liberty paid the ransom or not, we wouldn't know. We're just taking their word at it.
Tell me something. I mean, in the context of South Africa, and having considered the example of a city like Atlanta, and you would imagine that the U.S. may be, well, at least we would expect that it would be quite sophisticated in managing these sort of things. That happened in a city like Atlanta. Here it's happened to Liberty, who conceively have better preparedness and IT resources and skills. Yes, assumed, right? Well, compared to, say, a municipality, right? What are the chances that the city of Joburg could experience something like this?
It's anybody's guess, but using Liberty and the other data leaks that have happened in South Africa so far, I think the biggest challenge is information security skills. And that's where it all starts, because of the two that happened, I mean, the biggest one and the most shocking one was last year in October, where 59 million, close to 60 million records of South Africans, which included ID numbers, deeds office details, company directorship details, addresses, etc., were leaked online. And it was a case of negligence because this database was just put online publicly. Same with the traffic fines one. So the question becomes about information security skills that are available. Are there enough people skilled to do this? So coming back to your question about the city of Johannesburg or any municipality, are they attracting the talent that can protect them if a Liberty is not doing that?
And that brings us to another issue, which is a perspective that says we need to, and that's my personal view now, you can comment on it if you like, we need to perhaps start looking at something like this from the perspective of saying what is the value at risk, the revenue at risk, whatever, the commercial, whatever that item is, at risk versus taking a view that says, I'm establishing an IT department and I only have a budget of R1 million.
I mean, that wouldn't make sense, and I think I would agree with you with the point you are alluding to. And I would say, if in this age, especially a financial service company, in the age we live in, I mean, most of us handle financial transactions not at the branch or in a brick and mortar building. We handle them digitally, over the internet, over our phone. So that is already a core part of your business. So you shouldn't spare any cent in ensuring that it's secure.
And in your experience, interactions with, let's talk about specifically financial services industry, because that's a key one, it's a critical one. There's a lot of money involved in there, a lot of personal information that belongs to millions and millions of people in the country. Well, what's your experience in dealing with them on these types of issues? Is that the view they take?
The view, I think there's different views. Let's start with the skills part, where it looks like on the one side seems to be a shortage of really information security, not just IT skills. We're talking specific information security skills. So I don't think there is enough in my perspective. There's also, I think, the perception of not at executive level, at management level, of not taking information security seriously. It's just a line item that, as you say, we're just going to allocate R1 million. We don't see it as part of our core business. So it's that old IT as a back office mentality, but not as integrated into your business, not seeing it as one of the things that are key to driving your business. So generally speaking, I think there's that mentality of not taking information security seriously. And you hear it even with Liberty. They're saying now that they've called on the best in the world to come work on the system, but you have to ask, why are you only doing it after the fact and not before the fact.
Absolutely. Well, then there's the other question about privacy issues and the fact that people's data information essentially was usurped, if you will, right? So there's the perspective around the POPI Act or privacy issues, consumer protection, and so on and so forth. So there's that element, and then there's the business continuity element, and both of them were impacted, right? Which one is of more concern to them?
I think they would be more concerned, and they probably wouldn't say this, but more concerned about business continuity.
Yeah.
I haven't seen or observed the South African company that takes privacy of their clients seriously, despite us having the POPI Act.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to the fact that our information regulator has still yet to act on any known breaches or data leaks or privacy invasions. I mean, how many times do people receive unsolicited SMSs? How many times have we had data leaks? And people do lodge complaints at the information regulator, but the information regulator has yet to take any steps.
But is there a specific reason why it doesn't happen?
I don't think they have capacity. I think they've said as much or alluded to as much. The office doesn't have as much capacity to take on the cases, so it's a bit of a concern because the act is there. There is law to use to take people to task on this. Because even in going back to the topic, liberty, this is a case of there's a term that's used in the POPI Act. They're a data collector, yes, but they also store the data. They have certain responsibilities, according to the POPI Act, of ensuring their systems cannot be breached. Because once you hand over the data, according to the country's law, the POPI Act, they should make sure that that data, and once the data is leaked from them, they're in contravention of the POPI Act.
So they would be in contravention in this instance?
At a certain, yes. On some points, yes, they would be. If it gets leaked.
Yeah, if it gets leaked, which it hasn't yet.
Which it hasn't yet.
Right. And that also brings me back to the original question about the ransom, right? So these guys were successfully breached the systems, asked for a ransom which wasn't paid, and what did they do, disappear?
No. Yesterday, so I attended the briefing with David Monroe yesterday, CEO of Liberty. I think about 2 hours after that, around about 9 p.m., the hackers posted, because we keep tabs and we've got notifications of keeping tabs on what's happening on this hack.
Right.
We saw that there was a message they posted on a website.
Right.
Declaring that, because I think the Liberty press briefing was being live streamed on YouTube, so I think they probably saw that, because one of the things which I'll mention comes from the press briefing where they said that it's not only emails, it's customer data that they have, it's financial data and more interesting data, including all the directors or executives' email backups. And they mentioned that it totals, I think, about 40 terabytes.
Ooh.
And they said also, another added thing in that message was that I think David Monroe had said at the press briefing that no financial losses, customers haven't suffered any financial losses. In their statement, they quoted that statement and added that it's because we were trying to show you your weaknesses in your security system and not try to harm your customers. And they finally, to conclude, they said that if Liberty doesn't pay them, they will be leaking the data daily, samples of the data daily. But then coming back to today, around 10 a.m., they took down that message, which also has raised some questions in terms of why did they take down? I mean, your mind can go wild. In the absence of information from Liberty, which is very cagey, you could be asking, did Liberty pay? Were they caught? It's all sorts of questions in the absence of information.
Just a question about not just Liberty now, but from a national perspective. I've never been in government, so I don't really know how governments function. But if I were, in this day and age, as you say, in 2018, we're very much in a digital world, right? If you have infrastructures like nuclear power stations, transport infrastructure, Gautrain, etc., one of your biggest worries would be, and not necessarily somebody coming with a bomb and blowing up your nuclear power station. The easiest thing to do is actually to hack into it, isn't it?
Correct.
So from a national perspective, that would be one of my priorities. Is it in South Africa?
I'll give you an example. In one of my previous, when I was still employed, I used to sell and work as a technician on what we call intrusion detection and prevention systems to government as one of my clients. Yeah. And I remember back then, I mean, we're talking about just under a decade back. I remember back then, once everything had gone through testing, pilots, and they had agreed to purchase the security hardware, it could be a firewall, it could be an intrusion detection system, before it even got deployed at the government department or a government institution, there would always be a requirement that it needs to be taken apart by the NSA.
Right.
So I'm not aware if that's still happening.
Yeah.
So, and I think that should, if it's not happening, then that's a big concern. It should be a big concern because it should be a priority. As you say, in 2018, information security is a big thing because everything is interconnected.
And then that's also not just in relation to government departments or state entities, right? From a national perspective, we just had a discussion now about the banking system. So one of the ways to cripple a country is simply to collapse the banking system.
Correct.
Right. So even the state authorities, the government authorities should be worried about what happens cybersecurity-wise in the private sector. Is there that kind of coordination?
I think there is. I am aware. I think the NPA have been in touch or are looking to get into talks with Liberty. I can't confirm, but I think that's what we've heard. And they're talking to authorities as far from Liberty's perspective.
Right.
But generally speaking, and not just the specific case, there isn't the desired level of sort of interaction between the public and the private sectors on matters of information security.
Yeah, and
that's
a worry.
Yes, it's a big worry. I mean, there isn't that. You look at the Liberty case as we speak. All they're telling us is that we've spoken to authorities, and that doesn't give anybody comfort. But on the other hand, we haven't heard anything yet, apart from the information regulator this evening saying they'd like more information from Liberty. So I feel, this is my personal opinion, I feel that also government is not asserting itself in terms of information security related matters and demanding all sorts of informations and demanding all sorts of standards to be met.
Well, because I would imagine there's two ways of looking at it. The first one being in a preventative sense, right? So there would be standard committees and discussion forums of some sort between the government and the private sector around cyber issues, right? As a matter of course, not because something bad has happened.
No, as a matter of, yes.
Yes, right? And then when something happens, and then there's a particular process that needs to be followed to get whoever it is, the NSA, the NPA, involved. I mean, I cannot imagine that something of this nature could happen in, say, the US without the FBI jumping in instantly, or in the UK without MI6 jumping in.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, it's been quiet since we heard from there hasn't been a single authority coming forward, apart from today, the information regulator saying we'd like to meet and get more information. I think most countries like the US have what we call a CRTS CERT, which is a Computer Emergency Response Center, which is a national body, which is sort of pseudo-government.
Right.
Which handles, I mean, you could say it's equivalent to what you have in health, where if there's a virus or a disease, a biological one, they coordinate the information, they coordinate, like we had with listeriosis, these are the signs, do this, don't eat this, call the company out, pull all the... We're supposed to have that. We actually do have it, but it's not that active.
But is there really a way, ultimately, to prevent all of these attacks from happening? Or are you going to catch some and not others?
The biggest factor is humans. And the weakest link in your security system in IT is humans. As long as there's a human, so it could be, I mean, in the case of Liberty, it could still be a human factor. Again, this is speculation in the absence of them not giving out information. Right. It could be that a system wasn't updated. That's why people could breach it. It could be that not regular testing was done, penetration testing was done to check like ongoing vulnerabilities in their systems. So the biggest factor as far as weakness in security systems, I'd say the number one factor is humans. Yeah. Then following from there, obviously, it would be other systems.
And once you're infected, what do you do?
In the case of Liberty, I think it's tricky because they run the risk. Now that the hackers say they have this 40 terabytes of data, there's two things that could happen. Liberty could pay the ransom and hope this disappears and hope the hackers keep their word. But I don't think that will happen because it's already public.
Yeah.
But the bigger risk now is that the hackers say they have the data. They could go onto the dark web and sell this to the highest bidder.
Because, I mean, we don't know what that data is. It could be
Correct.
credit card
It
details,
could be credit card
could be
detail,
bank account details,
investment
and
details.
passwords,
Yeah.
Lord knows what, right?
Correct. So they could go onto the dark web and sell this to the highest bidder. And then what?
One thing we haven't even moved towards, at least with any significance in this country, is this Internet of Things, which is supposed to be a great, wonderful way to interconnect or allow communications between humans and machines. With electric vehicles coming down the road, they will also be connected with each other and to infrastructures, etc., etc. So everything theoretically will be connected. There'll be sensors everywhere, environmental sensors, health sensors, etc., etc. All of these things then are vulnerable to these kinds of events.
Definitely. And now it's even worse. You're putting these internet-connected things that are critical to people's day-to-day lives, but these people don't have the knowledge or the skills in terms from a security perspective. So take things like baby monitors. I think there was a case in the UK. I can't remember exact year where baby monitors were hacked.
Yeah.
That's scary. Having somebody, a stranger, speaking to your baby over a baby monitor over the internet.
Yeah.
So again, it goes back to security.
I think this is a real wake-up call, a real wake-up call. And therefore, thank you very much for coming on to Afro Prime Business. And we'll talk again.
Thank you for having me, Harold.
Until next time, it's good night from me.